So all your sales meetings falling into ultimately the sea of what we call sameness, a real focus on your business, your experience, your prices, your features, and your benefits. But then you wonder why the buyer pushes back or doesn't choose you or goes elsewhere or doesn't do anything, and they negotiate you down on price. From the buyer's perspective, though, do you ever consider why that happens? In the absence of any value, any empathy to show you actually understand my problems or what it is I might need your solution for, you've not left me any choice but to compare you to the one thing that's left, and that is your price. We like to share here at Plan Grow Do and across the work we do with B2B organizations about the sharing of insights over information. You have to become more relevant to your potential buyer's predicament position by offering more than what they can just Google. And today I really want to dig into something that's very popular and out of the Challenger Sale book, which you can see behind me. I'm delighted to be speaking to one of the authors of that book, which most of you will probably recognize, about that specific concept of insights over information. We're going to dig into how you can actually have an insightful conversation and put into practice the theory of offering that key insight. Brent Adamson, thank you for joining us, sir. If you could give us a potted history about who you are, a little bit about the Challenger approach, that'd be great. And how, to kick us off, since writing this book in 2011, I think you said a relic or digging back into the past of Challenger, how's the B2B landscape changed or evolved? And has anything surprised you? Welcome along.
Thank you, Rob. It's good to be here. Well, that's like 5 questions in one. Just get us started. So there's so much to talk about. So by way of just very brief introduction, my name's Brent Adamson. I have, for those who don't know me, who I'm guessing is pretty much everybody, I've had really the privilege and the honor, honestly, to work with some of the world's best researchers over the last about 20 years at a company called Corporate Executive Board, which then became CEB, which was then acquired by Gartner about 6 years ago. And up until about a year and a half ago when I departed, we spent all that time working with those teams, trying to understand what does world-class B2B selling, B2B marketing look like. And particularly, I think, Rob, sounds like where you want to dig in is where much of that research really has gone in the last 5 years. What I continue to do now at my position at a company called Ecosystems is understanding things less from the buying and selling side directly, but understanding what's going on, the selling and marketing side, but trying to understand what's going on the buying side. How is customer buying behavior changing? What does that mean for us in sales? By the way, just full disclosure, just as we get into this, it's not a big deal one way or another, but just so you guys know where I'm coming from. Since that time when Gartner acquired CEB and then spun off the Challenger company, the books, because I'm going to talk about the books. I imagine the books are actually owned by the Challenger company, so I'm not here to shill books or shill IP. This is just so have at it. Let's talk about sort of what's in the IP, and we can go for it.
Super, brilliant.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, looking at the Challenger method that we're also, do you think tech makes it all the more relevant, or perhaps more necessary for B2B to thrive?
I don't know that, the Challenger work has always been industry agnostic, right? So there's 15 years of debate I've had with people like, it doesn't apply to us because we sell pharma, or it doesn't apply to us because we're in financial services or in tech or subscription based or recurring revenue or long-term contracts or the one, by the way, anyone who says I sell to the government, then it's like, my hat's off to you. What you do is harder. So it still applies, but it's
not
just
different
harder.
Apart from that one.
I think I will give some grace to the people who sell to the government, whatever country or part of the world you live in, because there is some added complexity there. But no, I don't know that selling tech or selling into tech really somehow dramatically changes any of the findings, Rob. In fact, the data will back that up too, that there's really no, when you look at the data and you control for industry, go to market model geography, it's the same lessons over the entire body of research, which since the original writing of the book has expanded exponentially. It's now hundreds of thousands of people we've got data, or well, not we, but the Challenger company now, I guess, has data on, and it's the stories kind of remain the same.
Yeah, brilliant. And one thing that really struck me from the approach, and it came to fruition just the other week when we was working with an organization, and we were asking them about how they pitch up to sales meetings, planned sales meetings. What would you do?
Yeah.
What's the plan? And they would say, well, we'll show them the deck. And I'm thinking, aye. what's the deck? What's the first slide on the deck? And it always talks about, they were very proud about it, their experience, their knowledge, their specialism. And it immediately just made me go straight back and think, hang on, this is exactly leading with, not leading to. And for me, one of the key highlights, it's just connected with and resonated with me so well, is lead to, don't lead with. And I just wondered if you could give us, from your perspective, what that means for those that might be listening to this.
Yeah, let me take a running start at this. And by the way, you asked an earlier question, Rob, which maybe we'll just park over here for just a minute, which is what's different about the world we live in today? Because I do think, as relevant as the research and the insights in the body of work of challengers is today, the context is actually pretty different in terms of how buyers buy. And so let's maybe put a pin in that, come back to that. But let me take as a starting point this idea of lead with versus lead to. In the second of the two books, this is where I start pitching the book. So that's why I mentioned what I said before. But in the second of the two books, which is the Challenger Customer, we get into this in a huge amount of detail around how do you build an insight? What is an insight? How is insight different than, say, thought leadership, which is something that we're all aspiring to, is become thought leaders and trusted advisors. And I think to really kind of wrap one's brain around the starting point of this is to understand or acknowledge that we all, I think, Rob, you tell me if you think differently, but we all kind of sell the same thing. It does, again, going back to your point, whether it's IT or pharmaceuticals, capital equipment, business services, every one of us in B2B is selling the same exact thing. And then what I mean by this, what we're all selling is change. In one way or another, we're trying to get our customers and prospective customers to change their behavior, to stop buying from that company, start buying from our company, stop buying our old technology, start buying our new technology. Stop doing it yourself and outsource it to us. Whatever it might be, one way or another, we're trying to get our customers to change their behavior. All right, now, what's the one thing, Rob, that most companies want to avoid at all costs if they possibly can? And that is probably change, right? It's unknown, it's risky, it's disruptive, particularly in an uncertain economy. It's not something I really am running to. It's more oftentimes something I'm running away from. So you put those two things together, you come to this conclusion, like the one thing we're selling is the one thing that all customers want to be avoiding. And so then we have to start thinking about not sort of much how do I sell, but how do I drive change? And that, notice, because the reason why I do this is because we're trying to sell something. We're trying to get you to, again, stop buying from them and start buying from us. But from a customer's perspective, what we've got to get their brains wrapped around is not my stuff is great or buy my stuff. We've got to get their brains wrapped around stop behaving in this manner and start behaving in that manner, such that when you behave in that manner, it will lead to you buying our stuff. What I've really got to do is build a story about change. And notice that story about change isn't about me or my company at all, right? I am an output of that story, but I am certainly not the center of that story. And so what you find is that when we come to customers with, look how much money we've made, in companies like you, with our solution, we've made them X bazillions of God knows what, excuse my language, like whether we've made them more money, or we've saved that, we've created more efficiency or more productive. All of those things are stories about us. Because we want you to love us. We want you to buy from us. So we talk about us, right? And what I'm finding, and what we found in all our research, is that if really what you're trying to do is sell change, you've got to start with a story not about us at all, but a story with the customer. Let's talk about your current behavior. What are you currently doing right now? What are your aspirations? How is your current behavior, your processes, your go-to-market, whatever it might be, how is that actually preventing you from making money or saving money or mitigating risk in ways that you haven't fully appreciated? How can I have a conversation with customers that gets them to say, I need to do something different? Because if they're not going to do something different, they're not going to buy something different. I'm not going to buy something different, then I can't sell them my solution. So now, when you think about, Rob, this idea of and this is, again, this all laid out what we call the A to B model in the Challenger Customer. There's kind of two dimensions of the story. There's the A and the B. So the A is their current thinking, their current behavior. The B is the kind of where we want them, that they're like the aspirational behavior, the aspirational thing, like what we want them to think such that they'll buy our solution. More often than not, when we watch sales professionals have conversations with customers, that conversation with the customer is almost always about one of those two letters. And it's almost always about the B, or frankly, it's always about the supplier. But let me show you how much, if you were to do this, as opposed to let me show how much money you could make, or how much risk you could mitigate, or how much money you could save if you just engaged in these behaviors. And what we found in this world is that customers will look at you, and even if you're convincing, they'll say, oh, you're right. We really do need to do that, or we really need to go in that direction. We really need to change. And so that they're sold in that new idea, But then often, and so then you think, wow, this is great. They love it. They're going to buy my stuff because they've agreed to change. But then they'll say something like this, either directly or indirectly. They'll say something, but what we're doing right now is nowhere nearly that good. It's nowhere nearly that effective. But what we're doing right now, given everything else on our plate and all of our other priorities and sort of where we are in the budget, the uncertain economy, whatever it might be, what we're doing right now isn't as good as that. But for now, it's going to have to be good enough, right? And so what we do is what happens is we wind up losing to good enough, not because they don't value your solution, but rather because they don't see the high enough sufficient cost in their current behavior. So the team at ADP way back when, like 2009, developed a phrase for this, which with permission I adopted, stole, whatever, and put in the book, which is the idea that what we really ultimately need to do is teach customers that the pain of same is greater than the pain of change, because they see the pain of change, the disruption, the risk, the cost, but they don't always see the pain of same. And so what we have to do is help them understand the pain of same. That is your current behavior, your current status quo is costing you more, exposing you more risk than you fully appreciate. We got to break down that A before we build up the B. Now, last point to really answer your question, Rob, is if you were to ask me, all right, so which am I as a supplier? Am I the A or am I the B? And the answer is you're neither. Right. And that's kind of the point, right? I'm like the C. I'm like, so once I get you to break down the A, say, oh, I got to abandon the A, I got to embrace the B, which is a new set. It's not buy something, it's do something, it's do a new set of behaviors. Then I'll ask the follow-on question, which is, how can I get that B? Who can help me get there more quickly, efficiently? And that's where you say, oh, funny you should ask. Let me help you with that better than anyone. Let me show you how we can help you with that better than anyone else. So you're like the output. You're like, again, way over here is like the C, right? And notice, if we come in and say, essentially talking about the C, like, let me show you how much money we can make you, money we can save you. It's not that they'll disagree. It's just that they just won't know. They just won't see an urgency to act. And so that's the idea, is don't lead. Notice where you come in, then ABC is you don't come first. You actually come last. Don't lead with your solution, your value, lead to it. Hopefully that helps, but that's kind of in a very fast talking nutshell, sort of how we think about it.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's very refreshing to hear that perspective. And in principle, it sounds like such an easy concept, but
yeah, it's hard though, isn't it?
People get it wrong in practice, right? Or just ignore it.
Yeah.
Hang on, we've got to go to price here. We need business. I'll go on the price. I'll just negotiate it down. I'll do it as cheap as I can.
Yeah.
So I noticed that in your work, there's it's a 6-stage process to how to have an insightful conversation. I wondered if we could go through the first couple of those in the time we have today.
Okay.
The warmer and a reframe, because I think that's probably where there's some real good value for those listening who might be really grasping the concept, but in practice, how on earth do I do it? What do I do when I'm sat in front of that prospect tomorrow? How can I start that conversation? So maybe you could help us unpack the beginnings of this in terms of how can we have an insightful conversation. What do we mean by the warmer and into the reframe? I think the great
it's so when people first saw, particularly back in 2009 when we first rolled out the research, 2011 when the book came out, less so today, but still you still see it's like, do customers really want me to be challenging? Like, do they really want me to challenge their thinking? And again, the data, the success stories, now mountains of success stories and documentation, the indications that yes, clearly yes. However, there is art in the way that you do this, right? Or at least subtlety, right? So, and the way you would challenge in Japan is very different than the way you would challenge in New York City, for example. And like you Brits, you're very direct people. So that's like, you just come in late on the line, right? But nonetheless, this first step is the warmer. Is like a full frontal assault of insight is probably not super, like if I no one's going to really do this, but even if the feeling, Rob, is if I were to show up and say, Rob, we've done some research, we think you're doing it wrong, you're wasting a lot of money, let me show you how to do them. It's like, who are you? Do you know what I mean? It's like there's a human element to all this. So the warmer is all about building a connection. It's all about storytelling, which is and one of the things we found in subsequent research, there's an article I'll make reference to that I wrote with the team. We put in the Harvard Business Review, January 2022. It's called Sense Making for Sales. And it's kind of like the newer iteration of some of these ideas and gets into information. You were asking about how the world has changed. It's a good place to go to pick up some of that sense making for sales is the name of the article. And one of the things we found in that research, Rob, that's really interesting is if you just show up as the expert, like, I'm here to tell you what to do, that kind of goes over like a ton of bricks, right? Because at the end of the day, what we have to solve for is not customers' confidence in you. What we have to solve for is customers' confidence in themselves and their ability to make a pretty high stakes, high cost decision on behalf of their company. And so it's like, oh, Rob told me to do this. Well, then I'm going to do it. No, it's like, don't get me wrong. If I don't believe you or don't trust you, then I'm probably not gonna do it at all. But just because you told me to do it doesn't mean I'm gonna do it either, right? What I have to solve for is confidence in me. Now, one of the real powerful drivers of confidence in someone is what's known as social proof. This is Daniel Kahneman and others who've written, gotten Nobel Prizes for this kind of work. And so one of the phrases I use, I jokingly call it the phrase that pays, because I use it a lot in my work, is imagine a conversation not starting with, we've done some research and here's a better way to think about your business. Like, that's me showing up as an expert. I'm here to tell you what to do. Be confident in me. I'm your trusted advisor, right? It's like, my problem isn't trust in you. My problem is trust in me. So what do other people like me do? And that's one thing. There's two things that every customer in the world thinks is true. One, they all think they're different. And right after they're done telling you they're different, then they ask you, what do other companies like me do? And it's like, you just told me you were different, but they're desperate for knowledge of what other companies like them do. So share that. That's your opportunity in the warmer, is say, here's the phrase, in working with other companies like you, one of the things we often hear is, right? And all I'm trying to do is level set on a common set of challenges, a common set of opportunities to kind of pull them into the conversation. But I'm doing that not through my deep expertise. I've been doing this for 30 years, and let me tell you what I found, but rather notice the language of in working with other customers like you. One of the things we've learned is, or maybe one of the things we've been surprised to learn is, notice now I'm positioning myself not as an expert, but as what I call a connector. I'm connecting you to the thing you want more than anything else, which is knowledge of what other people like you are doing. And there's value just in that alone, and creating a source, becoming a source of social proof. But, in working with other customers like you, one of the things we find that there really seems to be a struggle in a recurring revenue model is this moment where you've got an existing customer and you've demonstrated value and you're trying to expand that, and yet they, what, I'm just making that up off the top of my head, but what you're trying to do is get a customer say, oh, you're right. And then it's kind of a classic sort of discovery. Have you seen a version of this? What's it look like for you? And there's a set of questions you can ask to follow on with that, to kind of dig in that. What you're doing is you're building rapport, you're building a connection, you're building your credibility, that you've got a sense of that company's business and their challenges. So you don't come in, Rob, with what Matt Dixon and I once called the worst question you could ever ask in sales, like, what's keeping you up at night, right? It's like if I come in like with a blank slate, let's start with your businesses and top priorities for 2024. What do you got to get done and what's keeping you up at night? It's like, that's basically, I've done no homework. I don't know your industry. Please tell me your problems so I can solve them. I was going to say it's lazy. That seems a little unfair. It's perceived as lazy. Let's put it that way. But rather, if I come in with a hypothesis, and the hypothesis based on social proof, then that allows me to engage in that conversation as I don't know about an equal, but at least as someone who's earned a right to have the conversation and open that customer up to share. Then at some point, so that's stage one, the warmer. That was a long way to go for warmer, but I think there's a lot to unpack there. But then the reframe is that moment then where we say, actually, we have done some research, and maybe you rely on other companies if it's qualitative. One of the things we've seen that is really interesting, and I think you step back and lean into the curiosity, the surprise, because this is how I always teach Challenger too, is one of the things we've been really surprised to see in our data is that maybe relationships don't matter as much as we thought, but actually your ability to challenge as a basis of that relationship. I'd love to tell you a little bit more about what I mean, but have you seen anything like this? Whatever, I just put that in the context of Challenger, but the reframe is that moment where you get the customer say, wait, what? Like, what? Because what you're doing is, this is where you begin to reshape that mental model. You're beginning to essentially, so first of all, in here, let's go back to our A to B, right? A is your current thinking, B is the potential thinking, right? So in the warmer, I'm getting you to agree to the A state. Yes, that is my A state. Tell me about, oh my God, you have no idea how painful that is. Or, oh, that's my challenge. Or that's my opportunity. It's like, oh, so we're all aligned of where you are right now. Yes. By the way, we didn't break down the choreography in terms of A to B, so this isn't in either of the books, but that's what's going on, is I got to get you to accept the A state as yours. Otherwise, this whole thing becomes irrelevant. Now, the reframe is that moment where I start to just chip away at that A state. Do you ever think of it like this? Or here's a different perspective. It's like, wait, what you mean this is costing me more than I thought? Or that's like, and I haven't rolled it all out, but it's like, if you think about this perspective, like, if you start thinking about you thought you had a productivity problem, but you might have an engagement problem. I'd love to show you to tell me what you mean. So what I've done is all I'm doing at the reframe is opening the door, then to go on a journey. The next step is what we call rational drowning, which is essentially the data, the evidence that this different perspective matters and is having a material impact on your business. And then after that is is the emotional impact, which is the storytelling. Let me give you a sense of what it looks like at other companies, and then eventually you come around the corner and say, now, once I've gotten you on board with that new position, so I've warmed up, I've created a connection, I've reframed you, I've got you to lean in and say, tell me more. I've shown you a qualitative and quantitative evidence that reframe is materially important and has having an impact on your business. I've shown you yet again, social proof that other companies are experiencing this pain and a potential solution. At which point, in step 5, I can then lay out. So if this is costing me more, what would you have to do differently? Well, I'm glad here's how we think about it. And then however you put it together, there's a story around the solution. Like, what would you have to do differently? So now I'm building the B. So I've broken on the A. Now I'm building the B. What would you have to do differently? How would you have to act or operate differently such that you weren't exposed to that risk or you weren't exposed to that cost? But notice, even here in what's this tech, I don't know if anyone's tracking this very well because I'm talking a million miles an hour, but we're in step 5 of this 6-step process. So we call this the new way or a solution, right? And notice step 5 is really, it's not about the supplier. It's about the solution. So in our 8, so what I'm doing is I'm aligning 2 different models, this A to B model and this 6-step choreography. And step 5 is the B. It is, let me help you wrap your brain around this new way of thinking, this new set of behaviors. And then at some point you say, oh, you're right, but who can help me with that? Now at the very end, I'm ready to talk about me, the supplier, which again is the C. Let me show you how we can help you that better than anyone else. And so that was a long way to go for the warmer, which is just building credibility, warming up the conversation, and not just coming in saying, here's another thing for you to think about.
I think it's something that those new to the concept are no doubt going to be able to instantly apply to that meeting they've got tomorrow. If they just rewind this by 7 minutes and plan their meeting for that, they're going to have a whole bunch of success.
In fact, here's a practical tip, if I may, and I say this somewhat tongue-in-cheek and with a lot of respect, because I've actually done this too, but if I may suggest that we all go find our pitch deck or whatever deck or presentation we're using and take the first 4 pages and look at them and ask yourself, to what degree is page 1 who we are as a company, our principles, maybe a little bit of our history. We were founded in 1875 in the back of a pickup truck. Page 2 is all of our capabilities, all of our solution sets, all the ways we can help you. Page 3 is a list of all the other companies that put our trust. It's the logo page. Here's all the companies that put their trust in us. Page 4 is the map of the world. Literally, we used to have a page 4. Like, we had a map of the world on our page 4. It's like, here's all the places we operate in the world. So wherever you are, we're here to help you. Notice everything's about enough about me. Now, how about some more about me? Let's turn to page 3, right? It's like we lead with who we are and what we do, because we think the only way for them to buy our solution is for them to understand how much value we create. And then we come in with the business case, and here's the calculations, how much money we're going to make you. All that stuff matters. Just don't start with any of it. Take all those 4 or 5 pages, take them out, put them at the end, and have a conversation with your customer about their organization. And it seems so logically true, but every fiber in our sales being is screaming, do it the other way around. Every fiber in our being is saying, they won't buy from us if they don't know who we are. They won't buy from us unless they think we're a trusted advisor. They won't buy from us unless they think we're a thought leader. We've got to come in and demonstrate the quality of our product, the value of our product, the value of my thinking and my expertise. It's like, eventually, yes, just don't start there.
I think it's a great practical tip, and thank you for jumping in and sharing that, because theory is theory. Show me how it works. I think that's some real tangible advice there, and thank you for taking the time to do it. Just as we head to wrap here, Brent, you mentioned about how the buyer's changing, and we won't have time to go into great depth around that. But I wonder if it's a bit of fun just to wrap us out with the buyer changing, and if you had the chance to write the book again, what chapter would you add? What's changed so much that you...
Well, I think what I wouldn't do, Rob, is add a chapter. I'd add a whole new book. So stay tuned. But I think where we are now is a place where what happened 2000. I'm making this up. It's, again, somewhat tongue in cheek, but quite real too at the same time. Somewhere around 2015. I think virtually every CEO and managing director of every company woke up at the same day, looked in the mirror and said, we're struggling to differentiate. We're struggling to stand out. I know what we're going to do. We're going to become a thought leader, right? And everyone says, we're going to double down on thought leadership. And marketing got a hold of this. They got the memo and said, oh, I can do that for you. And so they built a machine called content marketing, and they went out and bought technology called marketing automation. And then they got a hold of better data than ever before, such that across this next 3 to 4 years, we all built machines to spam the world with high quantities of very high quality information. I call this the smartness arms race, all ironically in an effort to stand out, right? And so where customers are today is just overwhelmed with high quantities of high quality information. This is the heart and soul of that sense making for sales article. And so I think today, Rob, the challenge is if you show up today in all the right ways and leading to, not leading with, and following the choreography with your insight, that insight, it used to be everyone else is showing up with a product pitch and you've got insight. That's highly differentiated. Today, you show up with an insight and everyone else maybe doesn't have insight, but they have thought leadership. And there is a difference, and we lay that out in the second book, but they show up with smart things to say. It's harder to stand out in this world. And in fact, what you could actually do is exacerbate their challenge rather than overcome it, which is 3 other people just told me 3 other smart things. And now I'm just overwhelmed because you're telling me to zig and you've got data. They're telling me to zag. They've got data. I don't know what to do. I better just study this more. And so we're finding that deals are getting stuck again, not because customers lack confidence in you, but they lack confidence in themselves to just make these kinds of decisions. And I think this is where it gets really interesting, is that customers are struggling in sort of this crisis of confidence, not just around information, high quantities of high quality information. They're struggling with confidence around their ability to navigate their own internal decision-making processes, because there's just so many people from so many parts of the organization are now involved, even in small companies, that is just exhausting and overwhelming and frustrating. Just get a freaking decision done. And then the third way they're struggling is struggling around just how do we agree on what's valuable to us in the first place? Not like your value, but what are we even trying to do? So essentially alignment around objectives and tactics and metrics and targets and timelines across all those people is really, really hard. So to show up in this world and say, here's my insight, ta-da, is probably necessary, but I think nowhere near anymore sufficient to help customers overcome all of those forces that are making them feel overwhelmed. And so if Challenger is all about being frame breaking, I think the big opportunity today to really stand up, be different, and be helpful is to be what I would call frame making, which is to help customers put a framework around decision processes, a framework around information, a framework around value, such that customers feel like maybe we can do this. So what Challenger at the time when it came out, I'm going to simplify it desperately unfairly, which is show up with just like a really good idea, really good insight about the customer's organization, and that's sufficient to differentiate and win. And I think that's been true for 10 years. In the last 4 or 5, I think that's again become necessary but insufficient. It's the window of opportunity to differentiate based on that approach alone. It's probably, it will never close completely, but it's narrowing. There you go.
It's fascinating. And I think Brent will have to have a part 2 around this, because that buyer conversation
100%.
sounds like we could chat for many hours around this, but
stay tuned.
I've taken enough of your time, and I think there's some real good takeaways there. And Brent, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today. Where can we connect with you these days, if not with the book?
Yeah, probably the quickest, easiest way to find me is where we all hang out, right? In the watering hole called LinkedIn. So that's the so yeah, reach out, connect, send me a note if you find this helpful. And that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Super. Brent, thank you so much, mate. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Absolutely, Rob. Cheers, everybody.